as our government is probably one of the most complicit out there in the entirety of countries. So we are out there from 9:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. in the
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to the Struggle Video News. This will be hard to watch, but it's necessary. A few weeks ago, a young boy screaming for food. Tens of thousands of Palestinian children in Gaza would scream this way if they only had the energy. Food charity trucks have been cut off from Gaza for months now, and even corporate news is showing some of the grim pictures. So Israel had to come up with a new plan, a plan to pretend to allow people to eat, while at the same time forcing Gaza Palestinians into smaller and smaller areas. In those areas, there'll be food distribution centers where those approved by Israel are allowed to eat, given food for a couple of days, and then they would have to do the same thing over and over again. Israel created a company called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, guarded by U.S. mercenaries and Israeli troops. The foundation has no idea how to feed people, but it does know how to kill. 100 Palestinians waiting in lines were slaughtered just this week. This cartoon really does sum up this disgusting Israeli-U.S. plan. In a protest of the starvation, Veterans for Peace has organized a 40-day fast wherein veterans pledge to live on no more than 250 calories a day. I interviewed Joy Metzler, who took part in the fast. I'll be speaking with Joy Metzler. She's taking part in the 40-day fast of Veterans for Peace to protest the starvation of Palestinians in Gaza. Metzler is an Air Force veteran and is now a conscientious objector. Good afternoon, or good morning, I'm not sure. I saw a video of you with other veterans near the UN building. Are you there now or near it?
Yeah, so I'm in a cafe we've kind of been using as our launching point. We're on the sidewalk directly in front of the U.S. mission to the UN, as our government is probably one of the most complicit out there in the entirety of countries. So we are out there from 9:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. in the afternoon. Sometimes some of our members go and support other actions happening throughout the city.
Excellent. So why did you join the fast?
I joined the fast because I'm devastated at what's going on. Words are not enough at this point, and the fast was a great way to kind of get involved, do something, get out there on the streets, raise awareness. And actually during this fast, we're doing a series of performance actions as well to try and do a little bit more than just stand out there and sign wave. But at the end of the day, this is the least I could do. I wanted to do more than just write stuff and post things on my Instagram.
So let me ask you about a fast. What you're taking in 250 calories a day. Could you explain that number and tell us what does it mean? What do you eat and drink every day?
So 250 calories a day comes from an Oxfam report that said that Gazans are getting 250 calories a day on average. Now, this number has probably changed quite a bit since we first cited that report. But the reason that we're doing 250 calories is, one, we're not interested in having to bow out in the middle of our 40-day fast, which might have happened had we completely cut food out. The other thing that we do is we take in a lot of water, we take in a lot of electrolytes. Personally, I used an electrolyte source that has calories, which counted towards my 250 calorie limit, but we're trying to get 0-calorie electrolytes. 250 calories really isn't a lot, so we're still hungry. It's still considered a starvation diet. I'm definitely losing weight. But at the end of the day, it's nothing compared to what Palestinians are going through. They're going sometimes days without any kind of food. They don't have clean water, and goodness, they're having to walk around miles, either because Israel has told them to evacuate a place that they're bombing, or going to one of 4 distribution aid centers, being forced to stand out there in corrals, and then getting shot at as they're trying to get life-saving aid. So this is just a small fraction of what Palestinians are going through, and a lot of us understand that even getting 250 calories with plenty of clean water, getting to supplement our diet with electrolytes, that's really a privilege for us, and we don't want people to forget how hellish it is for Palestinians on the ground in Gaza right now.
So how does that fast, that modified fast feel? Are you always hungry? Are you getting weak? What is it like?
A few of our members are definitely getting weaker in the time. So I arrived here on the 28th and and that's when I met a lot of the guys out here. And just watching day by day them get more and more exhausted, they're dragging. And we've had to tell people, like, for their own health, so that they can show up for the rest of the day, they need to stay home a day. We're in New York City, so we're walking a decent amount, maybe more than we're certainly not couch potatoes, and we're standing out there in the sun in front of the U.S. mission for a good amount of hours too. We brought out wheelchairs for some of the older folks. They're in their 80s or so, and they're on starvation diets, have pre-existing health conditions. It's not been easy for sure.
See the full interview on our YouTube page. Go to thestrugglevideo.org and click on this link. This note about starvation. In one of his last acts, Pope Francis donated the Popemobile he used on a visit to Palestine a decade ago for efforts to help Palestinian children. It was filled with supplies and sent from Egypt this week, but the Israelis denied entry to the Popemobile. As we record, the Madleen, part of the Gaza Freedom Flotilla, is about a day away from Gaza. Senator Lindsey Graham cruelly taunted the efforts by saying he hoped Greta Thunberg can swim. See her response on democracynow.org. The Czech-owned company Colt Manufacturing sells big to Israel. There are weekly protests on Friday afternoons at its West Hartford plant.
Palestine! Free Palestine! Halt! You can't hide! Halt! You can't hide! You're supporting genocide! You're supporting genocide! Halt! You can't hide! Halt! You can't hide! You are arming genocide! You are arming genocide!
Sam, there's a demonstration here in front of the Colt factory. What's it all about?
So Colt has been selling weapons in violation of U.S. and international law to terrorists in the West Bank. Those guns are being used to kill Palestinian civilians in increasing numbers. We're here to shut that down.
Who do you mean by the terrorists?
So we have documentary and video evidence that Itamar Ben-Gvir has been trafficking guns that are sold to the Israeli police to settlers in the West Bank who are using them to commit acts of terrorism.
Yeah. So how long has this been going on?
We've been here for a month. We have about 4 times as many people as we started with. We're going to keep showing up every Friday until Colt gives up this contract the same way they did in 23.
And what kinds of guns do they sell?
This is the factory where the M4 assault rifle is made. That's the main service weapon of the United States military, and the Israeli army has been switching over to it from their domestic designs. The Israeli arms industry cannot keep up with the demand for death that they've created. They have to arm their army as it commits massacres in Gaza, as well as gangs of terrorists in the West Bank. So they've turned to American suppliers, and the U.S. government has been facilitating that and arming those terrorists.
And you mentioned that Colt stopped in, I think you said in the 90s?
In 2023, we had a protest out here. The Biden administration stopped the last shipments of guns to Israel. The Trump administration has started the transfer back up. We're here to stop it.
Now, in watching the reaction of cars passing by, a lot of honks, a lot of thumbs up. Is that typical?
It's been beautiful. The reaction has been almost uniformly positive. People honk, people raise their fists. They, for the most part, didn't know that this factory was here and what they've been doing, but they are instantly supportive of the Palestinian struggle and the anti-war struggle here in the U.S.
What is the future of this protest? Will it continue?
We're not going to stop until this contract ends. We want everybody to come out and join us 4 to 6 every Friday here at 545 New Park Ave.
So I understand you're an organizer with one of the groups sponsoring this?
Yep, I'm an organizer with a few groups. I'm with CT Civil Liberties Defense as a coalition, and I'm also a part of CT Labor for Palestine as well.
Why not tell us about those groups?
So, Labor for Palestine is a national network, and we're the Connecticut chapter. We are an organization that understands that union labor goes into everything that happens in the economy, and that so much of union labor is what functions under occupation and producing for occupation. So we're in front of Colt. We just had, there's also been a giant protest at Pratt & Whitney that they just had a strike as well. We understand that union power has a lot of sway in what can happen in all these conflicts, and we want to harness the power of workers to help us, and we want workers to understand that they have the power to sway things in the right direction for the good of everyone, including those in Palestine.
Is Colt unionized?
So, I didn't do my research on Colt yet. I was just told to come over here. I have a feeling they are. And they probably, if we could have the Colt union as well, if they went on strike, if they wanted to stop producing for Israel, they could have they could have a strike over this if they really wanted to. And so we want to see our union brethren use that power for the best of everyone. And we want to see them defend Palestinians with their union labor and with their power of strike and to withhold their labor.
And we have heard of unions that have taken job actions for Palestine.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been several unions that have taken action for Palestine, and so we really want to see that reflected in those that are the most closely connected to the conflict in the war industry as well. That includes Colt, that includes Pratt & Whitney, that includes Lockheed Martin, RTX, all these companies that have union members. We want them to use their union leadership, use their union power, and their, fight with the bank. Money is where everything lies, and so if it suddenly becomes unprofitable to produce for Israel, we would be so much closer to the liberation of Palestine.
Now, you mentioned another organization. Could you say its name again?
Yeah, I'm also an organizer with CT Civil Liberties Defense. We're a broader organization that we collected, between unions, faith leaders, teachers, a lot of different organizations coming together, defending the right to do protests like that behind me, and to defend the right to health care, defend the right to unjust imprisonment like we see with Mahmoud Khalil, and so many other activists. We keep hearing more and more people who are swept up either by ICE or by some other organization, by police, anyone with no just cause and with no real fair fight to contest their detainment.
I understand you're having an event soon. When is that going to be, and what is it?
So we have an event that's going to be on June 8th. It's going to start around 12, and it's going to be at the New Haven Green, downtown New Haven. And so this event is going to be all these groups coming together for a rally possibly a march as well. There's going to be tabling of all these organizations as well to spread the good news that they do, and we want to have everyone coming together to understand the power that they have as a collective and what we can do for all of these conflicts, for Palestine, for the U.S. domestically, for healthcare, for unjust imprisonment, for unjust deportation, everything that's been happening lately.
So June 8th, what day of the week is that?
June 8th is going to be on a Sunday.
All right, thanks for talking.
Absolutely, and we'll see you there.
God, stop the slaughter! Gaza must have food and water!
The Middle East Crisis Committee and Promoting Enduring Peace are two of the many groups endorsing the rally on June 8th in New Haven. We're planning to have a table where people can write letters to Mahmoud Khalil in his Louisiana ICE prison. A shout out to Ms. Rachel, who millions of children watch on YouTube. She tweeted about this toddler who realized she no longer had legs. Ms. Rachel challenges all of us to speak out. Here's a headline from the staunchly pro-capitalist Wall Street Journal. 11 million people will lose their medical insurance coverage because of the budget bill that has so far passed the U.S. House. That's staggering. There had been talk of 500,000 people who would lose Medicaid coverage if the so-called big, beautiful bill passed. But this is so much worse. And as we've pointed out before, middle-income people should not think that they won't be affected. When you get old and the huge nursing home bills take away your last funds, Medicaid now pays the bills. That is in jeopardy. Now we continue with the talk by Palestinian-American political analyst Toufic Haddad.
In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, I was here for the Ben Gvir thing. Ben Gvir was considered a terrorist by Israeli standards. You know, he wasn't even allowed to be in the Israeli army because people don't realize actually Ben Gvir's ideological. Israel has always had a whole spectrum of like hard right ideological ideas, and even the whole idea itself of Israel, this sort of state of the Jews or whatever, is obviously highly problematic. I'm not going to go into it now, but what I do want to point to the fact that Ben Gvir was considered so extreme. Does anyone know why Ben Gvir was made, his tendency was illegal inside Israel for years? Because it has to do with the fact that Ben Gvir believed the ideological track that he followed it assumed, of course, that the Arabs are subhuman and that they're going to also hate us, etc. But they made an ideological equivalence with secular Jews. Between the secular Jews were also an enemy that also could be fought, and that also could be fought violently. Because if secular Jews were successful, it would destroy Judaism. Do you understand? So it's a highly virulent ideological conception, and they were outlaws because they began exercising it. In the early 80s, when there were early Palestinian-Israeli groups trying to stop the closure of Palestinian universities, they started to attack some of the more left-wing Israeli groups, and they said, okay, you're out. That's the only reason they were prevented from entering the Israeli parliament. But things have changed since now. But all that to say, you've got Yale University, basically, some sort of Jewish organization. I understand it's not from the university itself, but from New Haven or whatever, inviting this gentleman here to give a speech as though it's just, I don't know, Good Morning America or something. I don't know what he's doing here. I mean, so it's a dystopian situation almost. It defies logic. Not logic, but we can't be denialist about what allowed us to. We need to be sober and patient and analytical to basically understand this. So, any case, all of this points to the fact that American university responsibility is large in its quantity, it is wide in its scope, it is deep in its qualitative nature, and it is decisive in its impact. Insofar as, if this is long known, if had it not been American support for and the weapons that they gave over the last years, we would not be talking about the genocide today here in New Haven. It would be over. By the end of, Biden was beginning to restrict. You know what the Israelis were doing in Jabalia at the very end? They were taking old outfitted APCs, loading them up with dynamite, and then driving them robotically into Jabalia and blowing up buildings that way because they had no more 2,000-pound bombs. You see what, and they wanted to hold on to what they had and blah, blah, blah. Trump has unleashed all that, taken away all those restrictions and whatnot, and we're back not quite at square one, but whatever, we are where we are today. But all that to point to the responsibility. So I'm sure I have no dissidence in that regard here. The next part, though, and it's a responsibility that is direct as well as indirect. And as I said, the most important part about it is that it's determinative, it's decisive for allowing or not allowing what's happening there. And I also do want to say that it's not flat. It's not that, the homeless people who are just outside the door, who are trying to use public services here, do not have the same responsibilities as a corporate, someone who's decisive in terms of, some board of management or whatnot. We do also have to have some forms of a way of parsing that out. In any case, so that speaks to the question of the responsibilities. The second thing that I wanted to talk about was the dilemmas that we have now. Both the dilemmas that are ours as a movement, but also that are theirs, the other side, those who are perpetuating this. Because we all have kind of sets of dilemmas in this current situation where we are today. I think the first one to speak to is the one that's most obvious, which is the potential demoralizing one, which is that we're 20 months into this thing, and for as much as we've tried to try and stop this genocide, it hasn't stopped, right? In fact, we've seen it turn to the worst, potentially for the worst, we don't know that it's going there definitively, but we have to be able to act as though it is, because they're being very clear about it, right? Israel has rearmed, Trump has rearmed them with weapons as well as the machinery. And our protests up until now have not been able to stop the genocide, let's say. Maybe we have slowed it down, but it has not stopped it, but there are also factors that are pushing it to accelerate. We have also very clearly seen the undermining of the system itself, all the means and mechanisms that used to exist to sort of prevent this kind of thing in principle. The whole post-war order has actually been undermined, and those who built it actively are undermining it today, which is an important thing to bear in mind, because part of appreciating that is also part of understanding what it will take, I think, to stop this, to understand the historical moment we're in, and to situate ourselves within it. We'll speak about it in a second. But clearly, what is taking place is that there's also sort of a broader dilemma and crisis within U.S. political culture as well as in global trends, right? I mean, it's not by chance that America de facto re-elected a president who was accused of potentially trying to incite a coup or to overturn an election last time, and it resulted in 10 people dying for America to re-elect somebody who actually was willing to go to the extent where things got violent. It says a lot about the kind of political crisis that is taking place. You know it better than me. I'm the guest here, but you are living. You've been here, so I don't need to explain this to you. But in addition to that, you have one other dilemma that I also want to mention here is which relates to the high-tech aspect too. It's the means of I mean, when I talk about Google and Microsoft and Amazon being implicated in what's happening, and then I mean, if I were to say, okay, let's all boycott Google and Microsoft, I mean, those things are almost like, you know, state services at this stage, monopolies practically, you know, almost, right? So it's not so simple as just, you know, if there was one building that was the centerpiece of, you know, Zionist American genocide war machinery, we could surround it, we could isolate it, we could put up the information about it. But this is more diffuse, this is broad, this is linked and embedded and entangled in ways of being in America. So we need to sort of appreciate and have a sense of sobriety about that, the largeness of the task, and also what it connotes, I would say, or implies. But certainly all these aspects and these dilemmas, there's this additional element of it where I would say is that there's a broad corrupting dynamic that the genocide is having, not just on world systems of governance, but also on American capitalism and American governance itself, which we are seeing today. Of course, the most recent aspect we saw was how the state now has gotten involved in actually repression of students on university. Now that's not entirely novel. I was with Stanley today, who took me around, who was telling me about how the cops came in. There used to be tanks in New Haven back in the day at some stage. We're not quite having tanks on the street, but we do have federal agents in the state coming in and actually coming on campuses and kidnapping students, violating the academic freedom and integrity of these spaces here, violating basic principles of right to protest, right to organize, and academic freedom itself, all within a broader context of the Trumpist agenda has broad incantations of a strong sort of an Islamophobic agenda, an anti-immigrant agenda, an anti-progressive agenda, and certainly translating the...
That's our program for today. I'm Stanley Heller for the Struggle Video News.